John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured all to save. But though he sleeps, his life was lost while struggling for the slave. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah.
Welcome to War of the Rebellion, Stories of the Civil War. I am your host, Leon, and this is a reading of the regimental history under the Maltese Cross, Antietam to Appomattox, the Loyal Uprising in Western Pennsylvania, 1861 to 1865, Campaign's 155th Pennsylvania Regiment, narrated by the rank and file. And, just like I said last week, we are picking up at the ever-fabulous Charles F. McKenna. The Battle of North Anna, by Private Charles F. McKenna, Company E. The writer's service, in the campaigns of the Civil War being confined to carrying a musket as a private soldier, he was in common with all in the ranks, early given to understand that he was not paid for thinking, that his function was simply to obey his superiors, who were compensated for doing the necessary thinking. This will account for the fact that the writer hereby disclaims acquiring knowledge of military strategy or tactics in the field, beyond the mere manual of arms and the Zouave skirmish drill. The scenes and incidents of the 155th Regiment's part in the Battle of North Anna, as indelibly impressed on the writer's memory, will form the subject of this contribution to the regimental history. The first scenes and incidents attracting attention, after the almost simultaneous evacuation of the fortified positions and miles of breastworks of both armies at Spotsylvania, and the resumption of the race of the rival armies for Richmond, was the beautiful, open farming country which the Union soldier was for the first time penetrating. Spring, in all its beauty, added to the magnificent picturesque appearance of this part of Virginia, with its fine plantations and large mansions, as our army marched to the south side of the North Anna, continuing Grant's left flank movement. Warren's 5th Army Corps again led the advance, and Ayres' brigade, in which the 155th Regiment was serving, headed the column for the North Anna, which was required to be crossed in the new, quote, "on to Richmond," unquote, march of Grant's army. Surprise to slave population. The most surprised inhabitants whom we met on this march, and who flocked to the roadside crossings and tarried with us at our frequent halts, were the slaves. Field hands, men and women and children, all greeting the Army of Freedom with most enthusiastic wonder and welcomes, all the white inhabitants having disappeared in advance of our arrival. The unsophisticated conduct and innocent credulity of this slave population on seeing the Yankee army for the first time afforded much amusement to the latter. Presents of penknives, or even small change tendered to these quaint people by comrades, would immediately be declined and rejected with looks of pain and horror, on mischievous comrades whispering to them that the gifts thus lavishly bestowed were haunted, and that because of being thus bewitched, the donors were making the present just to escape the dreaded spirits, etc. All efforts to convince them that the articles so presented were not hoodooed were unavailing. To the fidelity of one of this faithful race, however, the 5th Army Corps became much indebted on this morning's march. Union scouts had reported to General Warren that the ford of the North Anna on the road his column was marching was already in possession of a strong force of the enemy, with batteries in position, supported by Breckinridge's Confederate corps, to oppose the crossing by the Federal troops. General Warren impressed a bright-looking slave as a guide to lead him to other roads and fords at which to cross the North Anna. The army maps of the country furnished commanding generals were, as usual, found to be defective and unreliable. Under this native guide, the 5th Corps column was diverted to another road, leading to a rarely used ford, and for which reason it had been left unguarded by the enemy. Jericho Ford was accordingly selected by General Warren at the point of crossing, instead of the other ford on the main road, where the enemy, in anticipation, were watching on May 23rd. Humors of fording the river. At this point, the North Anna River was nearly 4 feet deep, and Warren hurried his advanced columns across at the newly discovered ford to secure positions before the enemy would discover his change of route and march to oppose his advance. Accordingly, there was no time to be lost, or to await the arrival and laying of the pontoons, a delay which would probably have taken an hour or more. On reaching the river banks, companies and regiments hurriedly, without divesting themselves of clothing, proceeded to ford the stream, which was found to have considerable current. At the place of fording, officers and men on horseback could safely cross. Amid the hurry and excitement of the impending battle, many irresistibly humorous scenes occurred as the 155th was crossing at the ford. Companies K, H, and G, being all recruited from Clarion and other adjacent counties, abounding in extremely tall men, had enough giants in stature in their ranks to make the fording in the 3 or 4 foot stage of water not a serious matter to them. Lieutenant D. Porter Marshall of Company K was the tallest man in the regiment, if not in the army, reaching 6 feet 7 or 8. He was among the first to cross with safety, if not dignity, followed by Comrades Sloan, Kirkpatrick, Blair, and other long-legged veterans of the companies named, all carrying their guns, cartridge boxes, haversacks, and cooking utensils on their heads. A different problem, however, was presented at the ford when such well-known short-statured comrades as Color Corporals Harry M. Curry, Tom McCush, Charles A. Walters, and Frank Gilmore, all of whom were well under 6 feet, appeared and attempted to wade across. As Jimmy Finnegan of Company D, Johnny Boyd of Company C, and Huey Bain of Company E, all of diminutive height, stood on the river bank, hesitating to attempt the crossing, Hawden Marshall, the drum major, assisted by Samuel Heflick, the regimental fifer, improvised a raft, and set sail across the raging stream, piling all of their luggage aboard, and induced Finnegan, Boyd, and Bain to become passengers. Bob Culp, of Company B, a veteran navigator of the Pennsylvania Canal, was requested to serve as captain of the ferryboat, and took command. As this hastily constructed craft went to pieces in the middle of the river, and the shipwrecked mariners were, with some difficulty, rescued by cavalrymen who came to their relief, thus saving them from watery graves, Commodore Culp was heard to remark, struggling in the waters of the North Anna, that if he were a profane man, the emergency for expressing himself had been reached. Others of the regiment, in successfully crossing the stream and gaining the opposite bank, slipped back into the water and received involuntary baths. They at once became busy in efforts to save their equipment and rations from total loss. Despite all these difficulties in effecting a crossing of the rank and file before the pontoons had reached the stream, General Ayres, who on horseback with his staff, had been the first to cross the North Anna, soon selected for his command a strong defensive position. He planted the well-known headquarters flag, with its large white Maltese cross, in an open field not far from the river bank. Rallying round the flag. All of General Ayres' staff and orderlies were deployed to meet the troops, wading the stream as soon as they had crossed to escort them to the chosen position of defense. General Ayres, in person, stood close by the flag, shouting to the rapidly arriving troops to, quote, "Rally around the flag, boys," unquote, and the nucleus of a battle line was hastily formed around the colors, so as to resist the threatened advance of the enemy's column, which was known to be in that vicinity. The obvious risk of the Federal troops, and being thus exposed to an attack whilst crossing the stream, was very great, and called for prompt action. The full significance of the refrain of, quote, "Rally round the flag, boys," unquote, was never more appreciated or realized by troops than on this occasion, as was shown by the prompt response and rallying round the colors. For some reason, fortunately for the Union troops, the crossing of the ford by all of the infantry of the Fifth Corps was not discovered by the enemy for an hour or two after it had been accomplished, and the pontoons had been laid, and batteries had taken position to do effective work. The rebel yell and frightened cattle. Whilst enjoying a rest, and as the companies of the regiment were cooking coffee and getting ready for supper, having their arms stacked close by, the familiar sound of the rebel yell was heard emanating from the woods immediately opposite the position occupied by the 155th Regiment. This was promptly followed by the appearance in our front of frightened cattle, hogs, sheep, and turkeys, all fleeing from the advancing columns of the Confederates, bent on driving the Union forces into the North Anna. Warren's successful crossing of the North Anna at the unexpected ford was at last discovered, and the charging columns represented Breckinridge's and Hill's corps of Confederates. The first skirmish line of battle encountered by the Confederates on this attack was composed of the trained veterans of a score of battles, the United States Regulars, under command of Captain Frederick Winthrop. The enemy's first attack was checked, and finally repulsed with very great losses. The enemy, reinforced, rallied and renewed its charges and assaults on the skirmish line held by regulars, who, being finally overpowered, were relieved by the line of battle on which the 155th Regiment was serving. The enemy renewed its assault upon this new line of battle, which had advanced and relieved the skirmish line of regulars. The enemy was repulsed each time with great loss, at intervals of 10 or 15 minutes during the night of the 23rd. The Confederate columns made unsuccessful assaults on both the skirmish and regular lines of battle. When not so rallying to drive the Federal column from its strong position, the Confederate sharpshooters and pickets kept up an almost incessant firing. The flow and ebb of pickets and skirmishers' fire between the contending armies continued the whole night. Frequently, the skirmish line was driven back to the breastworks by the enemy. The occupants of the breastworks composing our main line of battle also became actively engaged in firing and in repulsing the enemy. The defenders of the breastworks, when not so pressed by the enemy, were employed in the work of erecting and in strengthening the defensive line of breastworks. Building breastworks under fire. To the man in the ranks, trying, between these attacks of the enemy, with pick, spade, and axe to build breastworks, to drop these implements at short intervals and to seize his gun, and every half hour to resume loading and firing at the enemy, was quite trying. To others, worn out and fatigued from picket duty, trying to catch a few moments' sleep behind the breastworks and course of construction, the frequent rude awakening and call to arms was scarcely less provoking. On the distribution of axes, picks, and shovels to the regiment with orders to erect breastworks to strengthen the position of the line of battle, the supply of these tools ran out before the rider was reached. At first, this escape from using implements so unfamiliar to him and the avoidance of expenditure of muscle was the subject of quiet congratulation by the rider. Later on, however, as the earthworks appeared above the ground, it was found that men from the ranks were required to mount the newly constructed works, and with their feet to stamp and ram down the earth being shoveled up by the working detail, and it fell, to the rider's lot to be thus detailed. In view of the constant picket firing, skirmishing, and the frequent rallies and charges all along the enemy's line on the Federal position all night during the continuance of the work of erecting the earthworks, the position of the rammers surmounting the breastworks, it was discovered, afforded a fine target for the enemy. The firing from the Federal batteries, posted on the north side of the North Anna, it was also found was very low, and often passed disagreeably close to the craniums of the same rammers. Indeed, the fire from the enemy's batteries, it was noted, was not so dangerous to the men thus exposed as rammers as was the fire of our own artillery. However, when the combination became too warm, as it very frequently did during the night, the rider and his companion rammers evacuated and made descents into the breastworks. Their muskets being in readiness, they joined in the firing at the enemy, all building work being suspended until a lull in the battle again occurred, and made it comparatively safe to proceed with such work. The shocking bad manners of the Confederates in interrupting our evening meal was bad enough, and called for severe criticism, but to continue their annoying and impudent attentions, as they did with musketry and artillery, all night, was worse, and elicited very prompt resentment and indignant shots from the Federal musketry and artillery. Costly mistake of enemy. The enemy paid dearly, however, for the mistake made in leaving unguarded Jericho Ford, at which Warren's corps crossed the North Anna, and in also trying to retrieve this error by unsuccessful efforts in attacking columns of infantry and artillery supports to recover the position thus lost, and in their attempts to drive the Fifth Corps from the impregnable position secured by General Ayres in crossing the North Anna. Privates William S. Hindman of Company E and Theodore Baldwin of Company F died soldiers' death in this battle. Both, though mere boys, were tried and true soldiers in many battles. Young Hindman's parents were pioneer settlers of Elizabeth Township, and young Baldwin's family were among the early settlers of Pittsburgh. These boys were among the writer's closest friends. The opening of the action by the enemy occurred immediately in front of the position occupied by the 155th Regiment, and which position continued, as stated, to be a point of assault during the daylight and midnight attacks. The next day, after the enemy had retreated, a visit to the battlefield in front of the breastworks of the 155th Pennsylvania Volunteers, so hastily constructed, revealed the largest number of the Confederate dead on any portion of the battlefield. Credit for victory. The participation of the 155th Regiment in the highly successful Battle of North Anna River, May 23rd and 24th, 1864, fought by the 5th Army Corps, commanded by General G. K. Warren and the Confederate forces of Generals Breckinridge and Hill, redounds to the credit of the regiment as much as its part in the famous charge at Mary's Heights, Fredericksburg, or in the storming of Little Round Top, July 2nd, 1863. Lieutenant Colonel John Ewing, in the absence of Colonel Pearson during the action, was in command, with Major John A. Klein ranking next, assisting in the movements. Whilst the regiment had suffered the loss of such able line officers as Captain E. E. Clapp, Company F, and Captain Charles M. Johnson, Company A, killed in the severe engagements of the previous 20 days since the opening of Grant's campaign. Among the line officers of the regiment who remained, however, were Captain S. A. McKee of Company I, Captain George M. Laughlin, Company E, Captain Samuel Kilgore, Company D, First Lieutenant John A. Cribbs, Company G, Captain A. H. Heisey, and Captain W. E. Allen, Company H, all of whom sustained their well-deserved records for bravery. This sketch of the action at North Anna only covers what fell under the immediate observation of the writer in the ranks of the 155th Pennsylvania Volunteers, The other brigades of Griffins, Crawfords, and Cutler's entire divisions of the Fifth Corps all bore conspicuous parts and lost heavily in the engagement. The brigade of General J. Bowman Sweetser, in which was serving the gallant 62nd Pennsylvania Volunteers of Pittsburgh, sustained very heavy losses under peculiarly trying circumstances in the fact that the battle was fought so near the closing days of their term of 3 years' service in all the battles of the Army of the Potomac. And General Crawford's division was also serving the regiments of the Pennsylvania Reserves, whose respective terms of service of 3 years was also within a few days of expiring. In the case of both the 62nd Regiment and the Pennsylvania Reserves, it was truly pathetic that so many of the patriotic soldiers who had escaped the missiles of war in previous battles laid down their lives at North Anna when within a week and some within a day or two of the expiration of their term of service. Particularly conspicuous, because known so well to our regiment from long association in Ayer's division at Gettysburg and subsequent campaigns, was the individual bravery by Captain Fred Winthrop, the young officer already named as commanding the United States regulars on the skirmish line at North Anna. Captain Winthrop's appearance attracted attention, being attired in a gaudy uniform. His coolness and intrepidity, as well as his debonair appearance, as he moved along the firing line, twirling in his hands a small riding whip, directing and inspiring his men, elicited the admiration of all his comrades and superiors. The significance of the success of the Fifth Corps in the action at North Anna will be understood by the reader from the view taken of it by Confederate authorities. Colonel W. H. Venable of Baltimore, who served on General R. E. Lee's staff, in an address at the Lee Memorial Meeting held in Richmond on November 3, 1870, states, quote, that General Lee was constantly seeking an opportunity to attack the Army of the Potomac, that he hoped to strike the blow at the North Anna, or between the Annas and the Chickahominy, that he hoped much from the attack on Warren's corps at Jericho Ford, where it was in a hazardous position, separated from the rest of the army, that General Hill also was sanguine of success in this attack, but that the main plan miscarried through some mishap, though 1 or 2 minor successes on the left flank were effected. Unquote. The losses of the Fifth Corps between May 22nd and June 1st, 1864, aggregated 9 officers and 126 men killed, 34 officers and 725 men wounded. The greater part of these casualties occurred at Jericho Ford on the North Anna. Perils of Vedette Duty by John M. Lancaster, Sergeant, Company E, is what we'll pick up next week. We're gonna do this next week. Man, McKenna, he grew up to become a judge. He knows how to write things down, right? Can go on all day. Let's talk about the Battle of North Anna and Jericho Ford. And of course, when I mean the Battle of North Anna, I actually just mean Jericho Mills, because we're not going into everything else. So I found this really great article that was written by the 16th Infantry Regiment Association that was founded in 1990. They did a great little write-up on the Battle of North Anna, Jericho Mills, May 23rd. And there's just a little portion of it that I wanted to read, and then I'll link it in case you want to read. The rest of it includes a very cool picture. And this is specifically about Jericho Ford. And it's about the 11th U.S. Regulars, who just so happen to be neighbors to the 155th Pennsylvania Regiment. So the right flank of the U.S. Regulars was touching the left flank of the 155th. So you had the 3 U.S. regular regiments, the 12th U.S., the 17th, and the 11th in the brigade. And then next to them, you had the 155th Pennsylvania, the 146th New York, and the 140th New York. So 3 regulars, and then 3 Zouaves. It doesn't get quite better than that when it comes to having finely trained soldiers. My goodness. Ayers was spoiled. That's for sure. All right. Let's read this quote. It's pretty good. Quote, "The attack had interrupted the men's evening meal, which upset them in no small way. According to one account, the regulars, angry over their lost suppers, waited until the Confederate line came within point-blank range and then opened fire with a vengeance. Back on the Union right, 3 batteries pulled into position amidst the shaken 4th Division. The presence of the artillery heartened the men, and soon many stragglers who had fled to the bluffs gathered their courage and returned to the fight. Having sustained heavy casualties in their own assaults at Saunders Field and Laurel Hill, the regulars now had the grim satisfaction of dishing out the punishment, for once. As the rebels retreated to Knowles Station, Federal officers led a rousing cheer which echoed through the woods in a tremendous roar of victory. The steadfast performance of the regiment earned the men of the 11th Infantry a note of congratulation in General Meade's Order of the Day." So, kind of something very unique, right? We're not hearing exactly about the 155th, but hearing about a regiment that's right next to them during the battle is very interesting. Also explains why they are always talking about how, at least in the 155th, always talking about how much they enjoyed having the regulars fighting alongside them, which is really nice. It's high praise. All right, I think I have just a couple of other notes, and then I'm going to teleport on out of here. Let's take a look. And of course, if you want to see that picture, it will be added to the website under this episode's post. Let's move on to just some of the smaller notes that I had. The guide that takes them across that General Warren finds shows them the secret path, to surprising the rebels and then having to cross the river. Crossing the river is something that I really want to do. I really want to go to this river and cross in the same spot, and I think I'm going to soon. Maybe not too soon, but soon. As for some of the other things, making a raft in probably a few minutes to try and ferry your friends across, because you're all pretty short, probably not the best. Maybe you can just ask your tall friends to carry your things for you. They probably would. Very entertaining story. I'm glad they were rescued by cavalrymen, so they did not drown, because that would have been sad. This is funny. Lots of pictures in this episode too, so I will post them to the website. Please come check it out. Probably going to do other stuff on the website this weekend too. I have one more Patreon episode to do this week, and I think I am going to upload some poetry onto the YouTube channel. Anyway, let's get moving. How about the song Rally Around the Flag? They really did do it, right? Can you imagine? Your general is standing there next to the flag, right? And he's like, rally around the boys' flag. How do you ever come back from that song? How do you not fill and swell with pride and think about the time that you literally swarmed up an embankment, rallied around the flag, and then fought off the rebels all night? That's insane. What a memory. Every time you hear that song until the end of your days, you get taken back to it, right? Man, crazy. I know it happened a couple other times in their history, but that's a good one. The rebel yell with all of the cattle and the hogs and the sheep and the turkeys all running, driving them towards the Union. I wonder if any of those got cooked up as meals later. I'm just guessing. I would love to do it, but man, interesting moments in this war. I'm sure they never forgot that. As long as you live, the oncoming rush of all of the animals and the rebel yell behind them. Oh my goodness. Crazy. Also, we've got some pictures that show what it looks like, and even some wartime sketches, so come check it out. We have to talk about McKenna being like, yes, I don't have to do any work. In the modern military, we call that a skater, because you've got your ice skates on, so sharp that whenever there's any work to do, you just skate away. He thought he was going to be a skater. Straight up. He thought he was going to have them just slide right across the ice away from that work. But then he got, cannonballs flying by your head while you pack down dirt with your feet. Worst job in the Army? What do you think? That might be the worst job in the Army. In a battle. Oh my goodness. Have a drink for the brave American who led the 5th Corps to this secret ford, less well-known ford. And also for the soldiers of the 155th who died in this battle or were wounded. Because they were tough cookies, man. They were great dudes. I especially want to kind of take a moment to focus that in their credit for victory, they're like, look, this was as important, at least to the writer, as their attack at Mary's Heights, their storming of Little Round Top at Gettysburg, and doing so without their commanding officer, who was gone at the time. Pearson was gone at this point. And the fact that I think it was this and their charge at Petersburg that they were really like, yeah, you guys were hardcore. I get it. I've got a quote here from McKenna that's from what we just read, but I just wanted to reread it again. This sketch of the action at North Anna only covers what fell under the immediate observation of the writer in the ranks of the 155th Pennsylvania Volunteers. The other brigades of Griffin's, Crawford's, and Cutler's entire divisions of the 5th Corps all bore conspicuous parts and lost heavily in the engagement. So, even though they had this, I mean, the right flank, I think, of their position gets messed up and artillery saves them and all sorts of stuff. But, you don't know that when you're just fighting on the line all day and all night kind of deal. So, man, really crazy stuff. Glad the regulars are getting high praise. I think we're going to definitely read regimental history from some regulars. Sorry, it's only one episode, but McKenna likes to talk, so we got to roll with it. I'll see you guys in the next episode. If you're a patron, then I will be seeing you much sooner. I've got another episode already recorded and ready on standby for editing. For everyone else, please come and visit my website at www.rebellionstories.com. And you can also go to my YouTube channel, which is also War of the Rebellion. And of course, if you go to the website, you can find the YouTube channel, you can find the Twitter, you can find, I think, everything. It's all linked together. Very soon, kind of, hangout time with me. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet. Maybe on Discord. I imagined it on Discord, but with that, my friends, please take care. Have a fantastic weekend. Love you all. Thank you for listening. And thank you for supporting me. It always means a lot to me every time I see your guys' numbers come in when I release episodes throughout the whole week. Thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for everything. And take care. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Old John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured all to save. But though he sleeps, his life was lost while struggling for the slave. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. John Brown was a hero, undaunted, true, and brave. And Kansas knew his valor when he fought her rights to save. And now, though the grass grows green above his grave, his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. For his soul is marching on. He captured Harper's Ferry with his 19 men so few, and frightened old Virginia till she trembled through and through. They hung him for a traitor, themselves a traitorous crew, but his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. John Brown was John the Baptist, of the Christ we are to see. Christ who of the bondman shall the liberator be. And soon throughout the sunny South the slaves shall all be free, for his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. For his soul is marching on. That he heralded, he looked from heaven to view on the army of the Union with its flag red, white, and blue. And heaven shall sing with anthems o'er the deed they mean to do, for his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. Ye soldiers of freedom, then strike while strike ye may, the death blow of oppression in a better time and way. The dawn of old John Brown has brightened in the day, and his soul is marching on.